I'm excited to talk today about some of the innovation going on at the National Center for Families Learning right now. We're eager to share with you some big ideas that we have. I have some colleagues with me that will be part of the conversation today as well. First, I'm joined by Dr. Josh Kramer, Executive Vice President of NCFL. Josh is responsible for pushing forward our multi-generation education models, and a big part of that includes thinking about what's next for families. I'm also joined by a key partner in that work, Marcus Shingles. Marcus has an impressive background, and we're so fortunate that he has dedicated his time and passion to our cause of helping ensure low-income families are not further marginalized as a result of technology. He's worked with very successful companies, including Kellogg's, Deloitte, and Bain. He's also mentored youth by helping them learn key entrepreneurial skills that leverage exponential technologies available to them. Above all of his credentials, he truly cares about helping people succeed. We first met Marcus at our annual conference last year, and since then he has dedicated countless hours and guidance to our team to help us innovate and help us level the playing field so that all families can thrive in this new global economy, not just a select few. We're having this conversation because we can see the writing on the wall. We work with families who are struggling because systemic barriers have led to generational poverty. We know that jobs are not coming back for many of the families we work with because they've been replaced by technology. We're asking ourselves, what can we do as an organization that's not just about remediation, but goes beyond that to a new space of innovation? Innovation with and on behalf of our talented and passionate families and partners. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So with that, our partnership really started, Marcus, as you know, in 2019 at the National Center for Families Learning Conference, where we were together and you did this mesmerizing keynote speech, which lit a fire under everybody in the audience. We had 1,000 educators and librarians and administrators and nonprofit organizations, and they were astounded at what you were telling us about the future and what we needed to do to not only be prepared for the future, but to prepare our families for the future. So that started our partnership. And, it's just been really a gift to us to have you take us to where we are today. You've taken all of your experience and your contacts and you brought them to us, things that we could never even have envisioned or imagined that we could connect with. And so thank you for that. So now that we understand a little bit about you, Marcus, and I hope that I didn't embarrass you going through your entire career. So let's dig into what our partnership looks like for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon, very much for that introduction. And you did embarrass me a little bit. I didn't expect that, so thank you. You know what? Out of all the work I've done, kind of in corporate and management consulting and with governments, the work that I'm most proud of, quite frankly, is the work that I'm doing with you guys right now. So I really appreciate you rising to the occasion. We'll talk a little bit about this, but the biggest challenge with companies or organizations being innovative and doing digital transformation to improve their models, it's not the technology. It's well documented that those projects that fail because of culture and leadership. And I can tell you, you guys are off to a really good start because from day one, you, Shay, Josh, the whole NCFL leadership team has just been intellectually curious. There's been no not invented here mentality and just completely selfless in terms of embracing this model, just knowing that this is the right direction if the goal is to eradicate generational poverty, right? So I really give you kudos to that. I mean that very sincerely and authentically because I deal with executives all the time and I'd say 1 out of 10 have the immediate positive attitude to embrace this like you guys did. And it's really an asset to the whole NCFL mission, quite frankly. So yeah, just to give you a little bit of context, I mean, if you think about that, the summit that I came and spoke at in 2019 at NCFL at your annual meeting, I remember you and I discussed like what would be important to share with that community. And, I remember the discussion we had and my message to you was, it would be good to start thinking about a future back strategy versus a current forward strategy. Like, let's skate to where the puck is going right? And there's so much happening with technology that's going to transform the ability to educate people. So how we teach. Plus, if the goal of NCFL is to eradicate generational poverty through getting people into employed positions to make income to be self-sufficient, the jobs of the future, which are actually been accelerated by a decade because of COVID to happen now, it's also what we teach, so what we teach and how we teach are both going to have to evolve as well, and take an innovative lens. So, one of the things we talked about at that summit was, what are the jobs that we're going to start to see in the future, and how do you train people for those jobs? And I didn't get real specific on like specific jobs, but there's a notion here, an underlying notion, which is entrepreneurialism and modern day entrepreneurialism, meaning there's technology that was only afforded by big government or big business that now has been democratized so that an average person, anyone in the world, can have access to technology that was only afforded by government and big business a couple decades ago. And that trend is going to continue to happen to the extent that everyone can now be and should learn how to be their own entrepreneur and have access through the internet to the 7 billion people on the planet. And whether you're doing a for-profit business or a nonprofit business model, this is going to be relevant to you as to how do you create what I call an exponential entrepreneurial mindset. And that's really the kind of what we teach focus. And then the other thing we discuss, which is I think a lot of the discussion today, is how we teach can be totally disrupted right now, right? Especially with artificial intelligence and virtual reality and augmented reality. And part of the discussion today is not to talk about what we think we can do. It's to actually share with the community at NCFL what we're actually doing, because we're actually doing a full-on pilot in virtual reality to completely reinvent and reimagine, and not linearly improve, but exponentially improve the education model. Not only that I think that NCFL provides its stakeholders, but really set an example for all types of education, anyone in the education business, on how this can be done. So it's super exciting to work with you and the team. Again, I give you major props that you didn't hesitate even for a second. I mean, I remember when I got off the stage at the NCFL meeting and I came back to the table to sit down, you leaned over to me and said, "Great job. We have a board meeting after this meeting. Can you join us?" I mean, right away, we just started, the board was very much embraced this notion. And then from that moment forward, working with, being thought partners with you and Josh and Shay and the rest of the leadership team at NCFL, we're at the point now where we're ready to execute. And I think that's the exciting thing about this announcement, right? Is we've developed quite a bit that we're ready to actually execute. And I like to use the word leapfrog. We're about to leapfrog about 10 years in the future with how we do education. And it's good because that 10 years in the future just moved up to today, especially because of COVID. So the timing couldn't be perfect. And it's a real pleasure to work with all of you on this.
Marcus, thanks so much for your leadership. At NCFL, we've always known that leveraging the family unit as a central instrument of change can get us better outcomes for both adults and children. And I think what you've done is forced us to look at some hard realities. Going into the pandemic, we had a model that was working in a place-based sense, but we really needed to look at how can we deconstruct time and space so that adults and children can still learn together effectively. And I think that's what fully immersive digital education can do. You also forced us to think about what kind of jobs our families could have, especially post-pandemic. Maybe you could do you could expound upon that and talk a little bit about the kinds of jobs that are going to be available.
Yeah, this is an important topic, and I don't want to fearmonger, so don't take what I share as fearmongering. I think this is a legitimate and pragmatic discussion to have, which is, artificial intelligence and advanced robotics are going to replace jobs that we have today. Okay, blue collar and white collar jobs. Just like, at one point during the Industrial Revolution, before the Industrial Revolution, 98% of jobs in the United States were farmers. Okay, and all of a sudden these machines started getting created because of the Industrial Revolution that would do farming. And if you look back at the headlines of the papers in those times, it was saying that machines are going to replace everybody's job. Like, what will we do? We're all farmers and these machines will do the farming. So what are we going to do? And everyone was panicking, thinking that machines were taking over the world and they're going to take all the jobs. But the reality was people reskilled themselves for new jobs as the machine took those jobs. And economies rebounded and people rebounded. And there was actually more jobs in the end. And that's the discussion we're having today is, as AI and robotics and other technologies start to displace workers and displace jobs, won't we just create new jobs like we had in the past? And I ask us to pause on that for a second and think about it, because yes, new jobs will be created, but at a pace much different than the farmers' jobs were taken away. What I mean by that is, it wasn't the farmer who became the industrialist. It was the farmer's granddaughter or grandson that became the industrialist, right? So it took a generation, and there was a generation of reskilling because the pace of the change was somewhat linear. The issue now is the pace of the change is exponential. We don't have time to, the farmer is going to have to become the industrialist in our model. Like, we are going to have to reskill ourselves at a much faster pace because we don't have the luxury of a decade in between for these jobs to be displaced over time. It's going to happen very abruptly. And because of COVID, it's going to happen much more. It's just got accelerated even more. So the way we should be thinking about this is, how do I prepare myself today for jobs, for jobs that are going to be relevant to me in the next few years, particularly as a result of COVID accelerating the adoption by companies to adopt new techniques like AI and robotics. So let me share this point with you. If I'm a CEO of a company right now, 10 years ago, I could have used artificial intelligence and robotics to start to replace my workforce. And they're doing that in other countries. China's got a lot of automation, et cetera. You also see some companies like Tesla with Elon Musk and Amazon with Jeff Bezos, because they're rather new companies, they started off as future companies. Most of their factories don't have any humans in them. They're mostly automated, right? If you ever see it, it's a lot of automation. The challenge is most of the economy and most of the companies throughout the world, but if you look at the US, the issue with those executives to make a decision to put in full automation is that they become the poster child for letting go of the whole workforce and replacing them with machines. And no one really wanted to sign up for that, right? So a lot of the executives I talked to, they wanted to do this more through attrition, that as people retire, et cetera, they're going to be replaced and automation will come more gradually. And that was really the sense that I got from most corporates. As soon as COVID hit, it wasn't the executive that had to let go of everybody in the company. COVID is the one that made the layoffs, essentially, right? So now what you see happening is a lot of corporates saying, look, I've got two challenges now. One, I can't have a business that can be shut down by a pandemic anymore moving forward. I have to figure out how to get rid of human susceptibility to viruses, which means I have to get rid of some humans that are in key critical parts of my organization that are susceptible to viruses that could get shut down if we have another pandemic. I just can't have it. I have to replace them with AI or robotics, like the factory floors, et cetera. So you have this situation occurring where I think most businesses are thinking about now more than ever, how do I automate things so I'm not susceptible to pandemics and moving forward? And at the same time, you got the situation where the reluctance for corporates to let go of their sales forces, to let go of their employees, to replace them with machines, they're not seen as doing that anymore. COVID is the one that's made this change. So my overall message is that I think you're going to see a big acceleration in companies of all type, from blue collar jobs to white collar jobs, whether you're an accountant or whether you're a store clerk. Those jobs are going to start to be automated away very quickly with the advancement of how sophisticated artificial intelligence or robotics are being. So the question is, if you are starting to prepare yourself for a job that now a machine can do, you really have to pivot and think about, what is the education I need to basically be that farmer that becomes the industrialist, right? That modern day version of that. And I don't want you to think it's that hard to do. It's just a different way of thinking and different type of job. And I think part of the answer to that is, how do you learn how to become an entrepreneur in this kind of modern day time?
Yeah, Marcus, these are really, really intriguing points. And, NCFL knows that we have a family-based solution that's been effective for 31 years now. I guess my question for you would be, when we're talking about low-income, ethnically diverse families, which is who we work with at NCFL, what kind of advantages can we use in our education system today that may have been different pre-pandemic that can help accelerate their learning and prepare them for these jobs that you're talking about?
Yeah, so the great question, Josh. So one of the things is, how can we educate in a much more effective and efficient way than the way we educate today in terms of the environment we educate in and how people retain knowledge. And that's where, you know, what we're working on right now, partnering on, is how do we start to use techniques like virtual reality in some of that training and education. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share with you all, and for this, you know, share with the people that are going to watch this video, I'd like to share a little bit more about what do we mean by virtual reality, and why would that affect learning and education, and why should people be excited about this, and also separate some of the hype versus the reality. So just be very pragmatic on what we can actually do today, and then we can start to share in the announcements with the community, because we're going to be piloting, you know, these types of techniques. We're starting to pilot these types of techniques, so pretty exciting. And you know, Sharon, the way I view this is, in the nonprofit space, there's a lot of communities, a lot of groups, and a lot of NGOs, a lot of organizations like yourself that are focused on education. I think partly what NCFL is doing right now is you're doing an edge strategy, which means you're still doing your in-person center model, which is going to be fully leveraged in this. It doesn't go away, it's fully leveraged. But you're also starting to experiment, you know, and even if you get people in the industry or around you that say, what are you doing over there with this new capability you're working on? I mean, I kind of think this cartoon says a lot about the NCFL mindset. I mean, you're going to basically have a real opportunity to reinvent how education is done. So let me give you guys some backdrop, just so everybody is familiar in your community with what we're talking about. This is a 19-year-old. This photo is a 19-year-old. This is an individual. His name is Palmer Luckey. Okay, this is a photo of him, and I think he's in his parents' garage in this photo. And this is around the year 2012, I believe. So about 8 years ago. And Palmer is building this headset that you see in front of him. Okay, he had an idea. And you can see he's got the screwdriver and the wrench. He's actually building this in his garage. Again, think about this. The democratization of technology. This is a 19-year-old that is actually working in his parents' garage, and technology that was really only afforded to big government, big business, maybe a decade before this time, okay? Palmer Luckey wanted to get some funding to try to build out this idea he had, which was this concept of having a virtual reality headset. So what he did was, back, and you can see the date on this, this is September 2012, he ran this Kickstarter campaign. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Kickstarter, let me describe what Kickstarter is. Kickstarter is a website that you go on, and you create an account, and you basically say to the world, I have an idea, I want to raise money for this idea, and anyone in the world that wants to give me money can deposit money in my account right now. And if I can deliver on this idea, I will be able to give you all a headset for a fixed price. And if I can't deliver on this idea, I failed fast, I learned something, everybody lost their money, and it was an experiment that didn't result in something. I mean, that's kind of the way the model works, is you put money in, you know, and you can see here that almost 10,000 people donated $2.5 million cumulatively to Palmer Luckey. They didn't know anything about Palmer Luckey. They just saw this idea that he was posting here. They believed in him. They funded him. This is the notion of crowdfunding. It's a phenomenon that started in around 2012 with Kickstarter. And anyone can use this platform, and you'll see all types of creative things on Kickstarter. You should go check it out on Kickstarter.com. So Palmer Luckey raised $2.5 million. I think it took him a few days to raise this money. Pretty phenomenal, right? Now, this is not where this story ends. He took that investment, he took that capital, and he actually built out a prototype. And there's Palmer Luckey with his Oculus product, his prototype. It was about this time, I think, that he dropped out of school. So we're talking about a 19-year-old college dropout. I believe he was in engineering at USC, okay? He then approached, this is kind of folklore now, but the story is that he approached Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook at a party in Silicon Valley and basically got his attention to say, Mark, I've got something around virtual reality that is going to really affect social media and how we interact and how we experience our friendships and our lives, etc. I'd like to share this with you, okay? And I don't think it was more than a year after that meeting. Maybe it was, I think it might have even been 6 months later, but I don't think it was very long. I think it was within a year after that meeting of the 19-year-old college dropout sharing with Mark Zuckerberg, one of the most, you know, wealthiest people and innovators on the planet with Facebook. Facebook then acquired the full intellectual property in the prototype off of this 19-year-old college dropout. And I guess the fun question is, can you guess how much did Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook pay Palmer Luckey, the 19-year-old college dropout, for his prototype? Remember, it wasn't even a product per se, it was just a prototype. How much do you think they paid him for that acquisition? Like $10 million, $100 million? $2 billion. $2 billion is what Facebook acquired Palmer Luckey at age 22 years old. And here he is on the cover of Forbes, okay? Obviously, this made Palmer Luckey an instant, celebrity in the tech field, because here he is on the cover of Time magazine, virtual reality and why it's about to change the world. This was 2015, okay? If you go to Best Buy or Oculus.com or Amazon, wherever you want to buy this, you can now buy this product for $300. This product has technology that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, a decade ago, is now in this headset for $300. The latest version, it's called the Oculus Quest 2, just came out. And keep in mind, there's a lot of headsets out there. You can buy, there's a lot of different headsets that do augmented virtual reality. I'm just sharing this narrative because it just shows the history of why this is such a critical technology and capability that's going to change all aspects of our lives, okay? So 2012, I have an idea, 19-year-old college dropout, use exponential versus linear thinking. To 2015, I have a $2 billion company and I'm launching a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And that's the reality of an exponential entrepreneur. Now, are all of us going to become exponential entrepreneurs and get $2 billion acquisitions? No, probably none of us will. But you can be an exponential entrepreneur and earn, and if you're creative and think and have the proper training, I don't care what zip code you're in, whether you're in Silicon Valley or whether you're in South Central LA. And I mentor a lot of students and a lot of young people in South Central LA. I know firsthand that you can train people on this capability, on this type of training, and they can launch their own businesses. Maybe it's not a multi-million-dollar business, but it's a business that gives you a good, solid income, and it's a fun business, and you're your own boss and you're your own owner. And that's the notion of an exponential entrepreneur. And the reason I think it's more important now than ever is because most of the traditional jobs that you are seeing to earn income will probably be automated away to some extent. So let me take a step back. One job that a lot of people have is being a store clerk or a waiter or waitress, right? Well, you can see what happens to waiter and waitress jobs with COVID, right? The other thing, being a store clerk or working at retail, for example, I don't know if you've seen the Amazon Go store. The Amazon Go store, there's quite a few of them in the United States right now. You literally walk in the store and there's nobody in there. There's nobody in there. You use your phone to get into the store, and then there's AI cameras that are on the ceiling that watch what you pick up and purchase. They watch what you put in the basket. The artificial intelligence looks at what you put in your basket, and then you literally walk out of the store without even paying for it, and it automatically charges you on your Amazon account. That store exists today. You can actually go to one of these stores. They're all over the United States. That's what the future is now. No store clerks. So that's my point here. Some of the traditional jobs that we think about today are going to go away, and you have to prepare yourself. And so what we're talking about is this notion of spatial web, which is where virtual reality plays in. And how does AI or robotics or 3D printing or nanotech or biotech or blockchain, all these things, Sharon, that you indicated that you hadn't heard much about this vocabulary, this is the vocabulary that we have to start to learn. This is the type of things we have to teach people. We don't have to teach people how to code in this stuff. We just have to teach you how to understand the types of technologies that are going to change what we do and how we do things, so you can figure out how do we look at trends and think through what are the steps to get us to be ready for this exponential trend. And then when you start to understand this, you can start to think about ways to leapfrog. And I like to call this going from A to F. There's two paths that we're suggesting we take, right? One is, how do we evolve education to meet the jobs of the future and prepare people for the jobs of the future through education? But are there ways to leapfrog? That if we know that technology is going to make this type of transformation, can we just go right from A to F? Because we're looking at the convergence of technology. We're looking at things like accelerators like COVID. We're looking at where money is being spent by Facebook and Google and Apple on these hardware and software that's going to accelerate this. And it becomes pretty apparent when you look at all these trends that education and learning and preparing people for the future workforce today, that there is an opportunity to go from A to F. And that essentially, I think, summarizes the strategy that NCFL is announcing is this leapfrog opportunity. Would you agree, Sharon or Josh, or any other comments?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. Powerful to think about, because we would never have done that. We would have thought about increment, but when you really start with the end in mind and know what's coming to you, our families can benefit so much. And it's not just the families, but it's also the teaching force, the people in the field that actually are going to use this new technology to really accelerate the learning and take people to a new level. So we're so excited about a vision that brings together families in this virtual reality space so that children can be successful and can make up for some of the loss in their parents, and adults can get the skills that they need. Because when you get into this virtual reality, I mean, I'd never done this, and it's just absolutely amazing what can be done. It's really just so transformational that you can see that you can actually train people. You can train nurses who really can't go into patients' rooms right now with COVID. You can train electricians or welders, and you can train people to be entrepreneurs, which is so exciting to us because we're working with both generations. We have just been transformed. And I tell you, Marcus, at our office, we actually are having our senior team meetings in augmented reality on Oculus because it is so much more powerful and impactful. So I just can't wait to see how this unfolds. And I know Josh probably has some things to say about where we are with it right now too, because we've got some very exciting things we can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, Sharon. Some of the things that we think about as educators are, motivation to learn. What does the research say about different pedagogies and how that can all come together? And at NCFL, that's for the whole family. So we're looking at both the adult and the child and how we can bring them together to learn. And, fully immersive digital family learning just checks all the boxes. As we kind of pioneer in this space and look at it as a pedagogical approach, we're able to combine different research bases that tell us that immersive education actually is going to get better results than especially this two-dimensional exchange like we're having right now. But it may actually surpass the kind of results that we can get in the face-to-face classroom, as Marcus was talking about earlier. So we really are excited about how this can motivate learners and how we can use these new tools to gain even better academic achievement for both the adult and the child.
Yeah, one thing I'll share just to demystify what we're talking about is the inflection point right now is that this type of technology, virtual reality and virtual reality training, right? And I'm going to give a little video. I'm going to show a little video so people understand, they can see a video of what this looks like. But I want to demystify something. We're not talking about an expensive proposition. That's the key here. You already saw that the headsets are coming down to, $300 for a headset. I mean, that's a fraction of what a computer costs if you're doing remote learning, right? The headset is a computer. You don't need to hook it up to a computer. That's the thing about the Oculus. It's untethered, right? Number two, the software that we're talking about, in which we build our future classrooms, in which we all come into these virtual reality rooms together from around the world. The software, at least the software that we're working with, is nominal. Sometimes in some cases, it's actually free. And I think in the nonprofit space, you're going to find for teaching and education, it probably will be free. And you'll see corporates paying for it in corporate environments, but it will be free to others. So I don't want, this is not an expensive investment. I mean, would you agree, Josh and Sharon? I mean, we're talking about a really, really thin budget that we're using right now in terms of procuring hardware and software. It's really not an issue. Now, listen, 5 years ago, it would have been unaffordable. The software and the hardware was very expensive, and you had to call up experts and a whole technology team to come in and do this for you. We are fully self-sufficient in doing this ourselves. It doesn't require more, it's less of a technical expertise at this point and more of a creative expertise. For example, when we use TikTok, for example, on our phones, or young people do, I don't know if any of us do, but young people do. Think about it. They're not calling up an IT person to help them figure out how to post a TikTok video and all that. It's just intuitive. The software is free. That same paradigm is happening in education with education software. Many of the education software is getting to the point where, Sharon, you without any training or any technical training, it's intuitive enough where you can go set up your own virtual classroom. It's more of a creative expression that is a technical exercise. And you can start to use it at a very nominal cost. So, I want to I think it's important to highlight the fact that the reason why we think this is going to scale, the reason why we think it's relevant and adoptable, especially at NCFL, is the technology challenge and the cost are all very low on the kind of barriers to entry, very low on the barrier to entry, almost to where they're not even significant, right? And that's a big game changer, because up until I'd say 2019, 2020, it wasn't that way. We couldn't be having this conversation. So now with 2021 is the year that this inflection point happens, this pivot happens, to where it's like the alignment of the stars. And that's why we're gonna, focus on this, and we're focusing on this now into 2021.
Yeah, Marcus, and I would just add to that when you talk about that inflection point, I mean, why are we talking about NCFL here? Why isn't this just another education organization? And the reason is because through root cause analysis, we know that the education rate of the mother is the #1 determinant of student academic success. And so when we can combine these exponential technologies with, an innovation that we've been working on for 31 years, we can really light the world on fire.
Yeah, I mean, your guys' model of dealing with the family unit, that whole methodology and that mindset, there's already a brilliance in that, right? As far as it being a really effective model. If you combine that with some of the things that you're teaching, like there's a lot of what you're teaching that is still going to be very relevant, like some of the basic skills, some of the basic skills. And then if we add on to that, this exponential entrepreneurial element for these jobs of the future, and we do it in this virtual reality environment, I mean, we have this convergence that I think can be extremely, extremely powerful. Let me share with you so people can understand a little bit what we're talking about. I'm gonna play a video. Now, this is one particular software company. This is a software company we're working with, but the software we use might change over time, and that's okay. We're not gonna get stuck to one software. That's the beauty of this, is we're gonna evolve and be agile. But this is Spatial software, and the founder of Spatial is someone who's supporting us. And they, in my opinion, have the best capability out there right now. And this is what we're going to be piloting in. But I just want to show you a couple of videos so people get a sense for what happens in these spaces. You can see here, these are people behind these avatars, and we're all in a meeting space. And you can do it two ways. And this, sometimes you're in your actual living room, or you're in your actual classroom, and you're actually manipulating digital objects with each other, like these people are doing. Some are avatars and some are actual people. And it looks like you're in the same room with people. There's other technology that is called virtual reality, where like this here, let me just pause it for a second. This environment here is completely digital. This is what we call virtual reality, which means everything in here is made up. There's nothing real. It might look real, but there's nothing real, okay? And we're looking at it on a 2D screen, but when you have the headset on, you are literally in that room with people, literally in that room with people. And it's at the point now where even if we could be in a physical room together, we may decide to put on the headsets to be in this virtual room instead, because we have superpowers in this virtual room. We can have multiple screens, we can bring in objects, we can manipulate things, we can do all these things you can't do in the real world. So the learning process is more conducive. It's more conducive to learning and education, quite frankly. And but virtual reality is literally the whole space is made up. And what NCFL is going to be doing is we're creating these virtual classrooms. We're reinventing the classroom in these virtual spaces where we have these superpowers, and we can design these classrooms to be conducive for learning and education with no restrictions on physical, because we're in virtual. So anything we want to do that's creative, we can do. And then if I show you an example of augmented reality, this is augmented reality. What you can see with augmented reality is these are people that are in a room that's real. The room is actually real. This is a person that's in their office, but they have these glasses on that they can actually see through. So they can see the real room, but they see these digital overlays on top of the real world. That's called the spatial web. So what you see happening here is this person is manipulating a digital object that's not really physically there, but they feel like it's physically there, and they're manipulating it. And you can see people moving things around and working with other people. In this example, you see the gentleman on the right is an avatar who's in a real room with two real people. And those real people who have glasses on can see that person in the room. So you have the ability to take a real classroom and have digital objects and other people attending the class that aren't physically there. Or like we talked about, you can be in completely made up virtual classrooms where the entire classroom itself is a virtual space, which is what we're going to be doing at NCFL, is creating a whole new world of learning, right? And that's a little bit of the type of software that we're going to be using. And to set up these classrooms, you don't have to call someone from your IT department to come in and create these classrooms. A teacher can create their own classroom in virtual reality without knowing anything technical. And all that teacher needs to know how to do is, just like in real life, they know how to move objects around and put them on walls and put them places. It's almost the same skill set in virtual reality. You're basically going in and using your hands to manipulate objects just like you would in the real world. And this is an important point, because if you think about it, this is like the modern day version of coding. We're basically going to be teaching teachers how to code their own modern day websites, how to code their own virtual classrooms. But the coding is a creative process. It's not a technical process. You don't have to learn any coding. You literally just go into this room and you manipulate objects like you would in real life. So it's a really interesting proposition. It means that anyone can start to build these spaces and be creative in this space.
Hey, Marcus, this is all really great information. I think some people who are listening to this are thinking to themselves, well, wait a second, NCFL is an anti-poverty organization. We're working with low-income families who don't have access to resources, especially resources even to the tune of $300. You also probably have some people who are sitting in tribal communities that we partner with. We work in about 48 different tribal communities. In some cases, broadband internet is not available. So can you please just talk a little bit about how this is relevant specifically in working with low-income families?
Yeah, so that is the key question, Josh, and we've talked a lot about this. I mean, this is the initial thing that you, me, and Sharon and Shay in the group discussed was, sure, this technology is democratized, but let's be practical. I mean, is it really accessible, especially to get in virtual reality? Like to your point, you need internet access, for example, as a basic thing. Let's look at the year 2021, okay? And some of the things that are happening that are going to make this accessible to everyone. The thing you just brought up about access to the internet, which is a real issue. If you don't have access to the internet, you're not going to get on virtual reality, and a lot of communities don't have access to the internet, right? Let's look at some of the data, okay? This is a news article that was published about, what is the dates on there? October 6th. So this was just about a month ago. This has been in the works for years, okay? But it's now coming to fruition. Elon Musk, you hear all about SpaceX and these satellites that he's launching up into space and these rockets he's launching up into space, right? Well, one of Elon Musk's objectives is to give high-speed Wi-Fi to the entire planet. And he's been working on this for nearly a decade. And just recently, I believe it was in the state of Washington, he gave for the first time to an Indian tribe high-speed internet access to this Indian tribe in the state of Washington. It's part of his pilot, is part of the beta pilot of what he's doing. And this was internet access beamed down from satellites that he's putting into space. Notice the highlighted yellow part here. Elon Musk believes that only a few years from now, the company will offer near global service, okay? So this is not science fiction, this is science reality. And he literally has given an Indian tribe high-speed Wi-Fi for free. I mean, at a very nominal cost to places on the planet that just never had Wi-Fi. If you actually look up the article, you'll see the head of the Indian tribe actually talks about the fact that they were just amazed. All of a sudden, they have better Wi-Fi access they're getting better Wi-Fi access than I am probably in my house right now. Okay, so that's the first thing is you got to think about. Things are changing exponentially, right? Cost is coming down. And keep in mind, Elon Musk is not the only one that's working on this. I mean, he's doing a phenomenal job, but you've got Google has the Google Loon project, which is a balloon that goes over certain areas and in the atmosphere and actually gives Wi-Fi access. This is delivering a Wi-Fi access to Kenya on Tuesday. They started delivering internet access to Kenya. You've got a lot of people that are working on this. You've got Qualcomm, you've got Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Google's work, So my message is this: the barrier to entry of having Wi-Fi access, I strongly believe within a matter of months, if not years, will be a thing of the past. We will have Wi-Fi access to communities that never had Wi-Fi access, and it will be high-speed Wi-Fi access, and it will be essentially free for those communities. That's where things are going. So that's one component. The other thing you've got to consider is that as people get Wi-Fi access, you then are starting putting more people have access to the internet now. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but today we've got about 60% of the world's population that have connected to Wi-Fi. 40% of the world population doesn't have internet access. But look at the trends. The green is showing you the adoption and access to internet that the world population is getting. And it's estimated, like we said, 2022 to 2025, we're going to add 4 billion more minds onto the internet. And so that means 4 billion more people that are going to have access to education or contribute to education. Because remember, part of what you're doing here is if you have internet access for everyone, you could have a teacher in Australia giving a lesson to a group of students from all over the world, right? So you now can scale teaching because people can pop in as avatars, not on a Zoom meeting, but actually in these virtual reality discussions. So you can really scale both ways. Teachers will have access to students, students will have access to teachers. The other thing you've got to consider is that the form factor is going to continue to advance. My point is this, that Oculus I showed you for $300, consider that a dot matrix printer that eventually will be a laser printer, you know, to use an analogy, right? It's going to change dramatically in the next 4 or 5 years. Eventually, it'll be a contact lens like I'm showing you here, or some other technology. I actually tried on this contact lens back in January of this year by Mojo Vision. Very rudimentary right now, but this is where it's going to happen. Things exponential, the thing that's fun about exponential trends is they're not linear, so they're dramatically faster, they're doubling patterns, but also they don't stop. They don't stop. So everything we're sharing with you right now about these headsets that are $300 in these virtual reality classrooms and how real it feels, that is just the tip of the iceberg. It doesn't stop. Within 2 years, it'll double. It'll be twice as, it'll be half the cost and twice the resolution, you know, and twice the power, twice the capability. I mean, these are real legitimate trends that you can look at empirical data and actually see this. So we're at that inflection point where it is doable, it is conducive, it is relevant. This is the way that we can start using it today. As we're going to talk about, NCFL is actually going to start piloting this, right? But I don't want you to think it stops here. In another 18 months to 2 years, who knows what it'll look like? Everyone will have access to these devices. Even school systems like today are trying to get people laptops so they can do remote learning. A $300 headset is cheaper than a laptop. You don't need a laptop anymore if you have a headset. That is your computer. I can actually see screens in virtual reality where I'm computing. I'm sending email and stuff. So I just want you to, you know, thinking out of the box is that those barrier to entries, don't have a knee-jerk reaction and think that this is going to be a prohibitor to progress, because things are changing dramatically and we'll see accessibility go significantly up.
And I think what's really important about that too, Marcus, is that, you know, at NCFL, we're in a great position because we do have place-based opportunities, and they have place-based. We have an opportunity to go to a big mall conglomerate and to offer service. So we have an opportunity right now to get started on this and to go ahead with it, but to learn from it, so that when we do get this kind of access for the whole nation, we're going to be in a great position because we already have perfected what it is that we're going to do on our learning campus with virtual reality and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sharon. Like, you know, the other thing, like you're addressing the point of accessibility. What are we going to do in the next 6 months to a year before, you know, or 2 years before everyone has access to these types of devices, right? And you're exactly right. One of the things we've been talking about is we've been talking to mall operators that currently have retail space, because with COVID, malls are transforming. You know, they could very well become campuses for education rather than retail outlets. So we're actually talking to some of the leading players who run malls, because we're looking at piloting to where either you come to an NCFL center, or maybe you go to the mall with your family, and while you're at the mall, NCFL has a setup there where you can get access to the headsets and actually go and do your lesson, right?
Right. So we're breaking down the barriers already while we're experimenting with this, so that we'll be, you know, we'll really have a lot of knowledge by the time all of this takes place, where people everywhere can use this. And it's very exciting to think about, you know, incrementally where we're going and how it's going to happen.
And on that same point, let me share with you a little bit. If you start paying attention, you'll realize how quickly this is moving. These are the Apple and Facebook glasses that are going to start coming out this next year. So Mark Zuckerberg just announced that in 2021, he's going to start releasing his first Facebook glasses. Okay. And he's making a big alliance with Ray-Ban. So these are going to be designer glasses. And when you buy these glasses, it'll give you access to virtual reality and augmented reality, right? It's going to give you access to this whole environment, right? And Tim Cook of Apple, who's the CEO of Apple, my view is it's the next big thing, and it will pervade our entire lives. It will replace the iPhone, this augmented reality, virtual reality type of capability. And you can see up in the top right corner, Apple hasn't publicly came out with this, but this is kind of the leaks that are coming out, is Apple has their Apple glasses that they will come out with in the next year or two that will replace the iPhone. So you've got, think about that. You've got Google, you've got Facebook, you got Apple, you got all this tech money and innovators. 2,000 engineers is what is said is happening at Apple right now that are working on this. So my point is, keep an open mind, because I would not be surprised if we're laughing at this video 2 years from now talking about, remember we used to talk about if people would have access to these types of glasses or capabilities a couple years ago, because it'll be just one of those things we think about, like, you know, remember we used to have fax machines and dial-up phones and, you know, those, I think we're in that type of transitional period. I mean, the evidence is here. I mean, I'm showing you right here. This is how much money is being spent on AR and virtual reality and how quickly this space is moving. And this is important because the way innovation happens is it needs capital investment, right? So when you see big players like Apple and Facebook and Google and Magic Leap and all these players, Microsoft is a big player in this space, when they're all pushing in this space, it's going to make these products consumer products that every consumer has, everyone will have. And quite frankly, these devices will replace physical screens. I can just tell you, because when you have these devices on your eyes, you can see as many screens as you want. So it'll be even though one of those things where we look back and say, remember we used to have computers that we used to have screens that you had to look at, physical screens, versus being in a virtual reality or augmented reality world where you actually have the screen in virtual reality. So I know I'm getting into a little bit of probably what people think is science fiction speak, but I can just tell you from the community I'm in, this is just normal speak. I mean, this is where we're headed, and we're headed there on a super highway, and we're going to get there very fast. So again, kudos to Sharon, to you and the team, because you're completely embracing this, and we're not just talking about it, we're executing it. And I think we should discuss a little bit about, like, the plan, like what are we actually doing now to actually no more PowerPoint slides, no more presentations. Let's start to execute this with real teachers, with real learners, and get them in environments. And if you don't mind, I'm going to play a video, which we recorded it yesterday, where Shay, Josh, Sharon, we all met with Kristen and a learner in a virtual reality world. Maybe Josh, you want to talk a little bit about this pilot we did yesterday with some of the NCFL family?
Sure. Yeah, it was really exciting, Marcus. You know, very much to your point, we're starting with what we can do. And what we were able to do yesterday was basically bring a master educator, the 2015 Toyota Family Teacher of the Year, actually, into a virtual classroom from Washington, D.C., along with you from California. And then we also had two people, including a learner from one of our Louisville-based programs here in Louisville, Kentucky. And we put this learner into the room for the first time. And this is a mother who participates in our program. And we really wanted to see what her reaction would be.
Now, this is not a room that we set up specifically as a classroom. We're gonna give you a tour of some of the classrooms, the virtual classrooms that NCFL and everyone's creating, probably as a separate message, a separate video. But so don't pay attention too much to the space they're in, because we just wanted to bring them into a generic space just so they could kind of see the art of the possible, right? So I'm going to play that video now, and I want you to pay particular attention to the comments that the teacher and the learner make, Danette and Kristen. Kristen's the teacher, Danette is the learner. When I ask them the question, like, what do you think? What do you think about this from a learner's perspective? What do you think about this from a teacher's perspective? Because their response is actually quite interesting. So let me play that video for you now.
Oh, hey guys.
Hi, Danette.
Hey, how are you? I'm shooting people. I'm shooting people. Oh gosh. Hey, oh my gosh, this is the neatest thing ever. Oh, geez, Louise, look at all this.
So Danette, I got a question for you.
Did I turn the right way?
Yeah, Danette,
Yeah,
question for you.
great.
Hi. I'm Marcus. Hi, Danette. Your name says that. Your name says. So, question for you: has anyone shown you how to move around in this room yet, or no? Is this your first time?
No, this is my first time.
All right.
Everything.
All right, well, let's get started. So this is what we'll do. So first, I'm going to take you through a little. First of all, welcome. This is a virtual reality room. The thing that's cool about this room is
Oh, gosh, I see that.
you can decorate it any way you want to decorate it. Okay. I want to first give you some basics on how you move around and do things.
Go ahead, Marcus. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that, one of the things we'll do is we'll figure out teaching and learning techniques. Like, for example, if we just did a discussion on some topic, whatever that topic might be, let's say the topic had to do with things on this chart. I'm just making this up, but let's say it had things to do with stuff on this chart, right? There's some lesson, right?
So I can take any object I want and I can like blow it up. So if you're teaching a student about something,
Oh my gosh. I'm excited.
yeah. So I could have, if I'm trying to learn, if Kristen's doing a class and she's trying to teach people about biology and she wants to take a heart, we can literally go in the heart and explore from within inside.
That is the coolest. I'm so crazy impressed right now.
Right. So
I'm just crazy impressed.
now the other thing we can do is if we want people to join us, check this out. If we want people to join us here, let me sit down. You guys see me on the screen here? People can zoom in. If they don't have a headset, they can zoom in. Here's me doing this. And I can make this as large as I want.
Oh, wow.
And we can have 10 people on Zoom coming in. Here I just put on CNN, just any web channel. But look at and we can watch a movie in here. You can watch videos, you can watch movies. There's this over here is a presentation I did. And so it also has, you can put things on autopilot. So someone can come in here and just play this, and now it's just playing basically a file I put in here.
Oh, thank you, Kristen. I appreciate it. Wholeheartedly. Okay, I'm still trying to get this tonight, Matthew. All right, yeah, okay, that's what I said.
Well, then you can pull these things in, basically. See how I'm pulling them all in for you? So that's how you get stuff. Anything you want. Everything.
Back today. Are you ready?
Anything you want to pull in the room, you can pull in the room off the internet. Or also there's multimedia in here. So look at here's if we pull up. Or whatever the subject, and you can have multiple rooms. So like in one room you can learn about one subject, another room you can go learn about another subject, and you set the room up to be whatever you want. Here's here's an example, like when we create our own rooms. Like for example, I can create this kitchen. We can all go in this kitchen.
Nice.
You know what I mean? So we can create our own spaces and have any room we want. If you're doing a lesson and you want to see if people retain what they learn, you can actually have them come over and each person creates their own sticky note and puts it on some framework that was created or some lesson plan. Kristen, if you had a whole family come in to a center, if you brought them into this environment, how would you want to do it? Would you want to have this room where they sit in the auditorium style and you're there talking and teaching something? Or would you want to have a different room, like one about biology, one about science, one about history, one about math, and one about, whatever the lesson plans are? Because you can pop, when you saw that when you click on the rooms, just like you see all these rooms pop up, you can have a list of rooms you're going to take the students through, right? So we have to think about, like, how do we want to construct this whole learning experience using some of the traditional ways we learn, but also using new ways to learn. What do you guys, Danette, what do you think? You're the first learner that I think we put in this environment.
I want to do some more. Like, I'm ready for this to be out in everybody's hands right now. I feel like everything you were saying, I just can feel the thoughts of the possibilities of what this can do, like compound, just as you talk about it. And good Lord, yeah. I mean, it's easy. I'm like right now, like I'm still trying to get used to it, but it's easy to use. It's like infinite possibilities as far as what you can use it for, not even just education. Like this is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. I just want to stay here. Use me as a guinea pig, please.
Yeah, I mean, and you made an important point. Like you've only been in it for 30 minutes, and you can already make your way around, right? It's not like a difficult technology to use. It's easy. And Kristen, what do you think about as far as like you've been in this a few times now, so you probably have a lot of ideas in terms of how you turn this into a learning environment.
Oh yeah, and in school on up to like adult education and skill building, like the possibilities are endless. And then access for everyone, like people who wouldn't have had, families who wouldn't have had access to certain experiences or teachers or classes or subjects in a different area. Maybe travel is a limitation or resources kind of thing. You can experience kind of all of it.
Right. Imagine you're going inside, you're doing a lesson about the heart, and you're going into.
And going into it and seeing.
Yeah, you're going into the interior. Exactly.
What you were saying too about the history lessons and being able to actually show them where they are, or geography. Hey, this right, and with traveling and things like that. I mean, that's crazy. And I think too, the digital divide that everybody's been talking about in our, communities, disenfranchised communities, this is going to give them all, like, it's the same exposure. I feel like this is kind of level the playing field as far as the amount of exposure that everybody can get. Because some people can only maybe pay for those schools, you can get the best education.
Exactly.
Schools, private schools, but this level's the plan. And like I was thinking, like, oh my, I didn't know that we would see like the interior of the car. You could even do like auto mechanic classes.
Yes. Yeah. Everything. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. 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 And there. Yeah. When you talked about we call that democratizing education. It's making it so it's accessible to everybody.
Also learning the technology while learning a subject or learning something, but also learning the technology, because I just, the more technology evolves, the less you have to know how to program live.
Exactly. This is.
So you can make apps, you can do all of it, and it still be just as effective or impactful as like.
Yeah. I mean, think about it, Jeanette. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, Jeanette, these are the future websites, right, that people will have. Okay. So the fact that you're in here right now, and the fact that you're able to take this car, manipulate this car, and create objects, you're actually now more advanced than most people are on this technology, because not a lot of people have done that yet. So you actually know how to build the next generation of websites.
Yeah, one of the other things that I think is the mentality in which we approach this, and I think we've all discussed this, that when you're innovating, you got to be the guy on the right. You got to be the team on the right, which is you're not afraid to fail.
This was a diagram actually shared with me by the founder of Waze, Uri Levine, several years ago. And it kind of represents the essence of a true innovator mindset. And let me explain so this isn't misconstrued. But essentially, as an innovator, when you're using new capabilities, whether they be technology or new processes that require experimentation, because you don't really know what the art of the possible is. You don't know where the limits are. So it requires experimentation. You have to have a mindset where you're not afraid to fail. And failing is considered part of the learning process. Now you got to delineate that failure from incompetence. We're not talking about failure because of incompetence or laziness or lack of intellectual curiosity. That's a bad failure. What the failure we're talking about here is experimenting, testing, iterating, being agile, but not being afraid to try something that hasn't been tried before, realizing there's a chance that it might fail. And the thing I like about what we're doing is our mindset, and I've noticed this within the NCFL community, is take some calculated risks, but test the boundaries and not be afraid to fail. And if we do see that failure is going to occur, again, not because of incompetence, but because we've tested the boundaries and we realize things are about to break, that we make sure that we fail fast, we fail cheap, and we fail forward, meaning we don't make the same mistake twice. And this is in lieu of trying to plan and organize and analyze to the point where we spend all this time planning and analyzing, and then we finally execute and we fail and we realize, well, all that planning and analyzing was for naught. I mean, we could have been much more effective and much more efficient if we would have done small experimentations in these fail and learn cycles. So that's a very important kind of mentality in terms of the way that we're approaching this whole thing. And I really appreciate you all as thought partners in that exercise.
The other thing I'd like to share is this perspective on the theory of change, because you have to have a theory of impact or a theory of change on how we think this is going to evolve. And it's kind of the notion of skating to where the puck's going. So we're really planning future back, right? And so you got to think about what's the future going to look like. And let's just look at this from an educator's perspective, right? You got the traditional classroom model that we've been using for hundreds of years, right? An effective model, and very effective in some situations. It's the most optimal model. So this is not going away, right? However, you now have things that are turning a little bit upside down in terms of the economics here. So let me explain. On the vertical axis, we're talking about effectiveness of education and the ability to scale education and adoption, right? In terms of the number of learners in schools that will adopt this technique. So today, the traditional model, back in January, pre-COVID, that was the dominant model, right? Most things were in person. People weren't doing virtual reality learning. People weren't even doing Zoom learning. I don't even think that was a term back then, right? In January, just 8 months ago. So you had that traditional model, and that's what we've been using for centuries, if not decades, right? In classroom training. Then you introduce this new exponential model with new capabilities like virtual reality and augmented reality and holograms and 5G, all these things that are happening and that are coming, right? In January, very low adoption on those models. Not many people use that. And what you saw happen is this thing switched overnight because of COVID. All of a sudden, everybody went digital, remote learning, Zoom, right? So you had the coronavirus, people's perspectives shifted. They realized, I never would have thought that learning on Zoom was that effective, but you know what? There's merits to this new technology being used. You can do things you can't do in a classroom on Zoom, right? So we're adjusting, and it's not perfect, but it's also showing us new opportunities and new ways of doing things. And most importantly, it's making people tech savvy. So people that didn't have access to computers in the public school system, or maybe weren't on computers learning, it kind of forced everybody's hand to do that. So the behavioral change side quickly changed, which maybe would have taken a decade for people to adopt technology. But when you're forced to do it because of COVID, a once in a lifetime event, it actually accelerated this. So the prediction is that when we come out of COVID in the next 6 months, in the next year, in the next 2 months, whatever the timeline is going to be, when we come out of COVID, you're going to see in traditional education model rebound. People will start going back to school, start to classrooms, et cetera. But notice the exponential education model didn't go back down to low. It sustained itself because people got used to it, because people adopted it. And, you know, the challenge that we're going to see is that some of the traditional classroom model is going to start to realize that some of the exponential model was actually very valid, and you're going to start to see the two merge. It's going to offer supplemental learning. This is where I think NCFL is right now. Coming out of COVID, NCFL is still doing the traditional in-person model at the centers, but they're also starting to leverage this exponential model more into their way of education, introducing augmented and virtual reality. And I think what we'll see over time, I don't know if it's 5 years, I don't know if it's 10 years, I don't know if it's 1 year, but think exponential, don't think linear in terms of the time. You're going to start to see the education, the exponential model, entrepreneurial training using these types of capabilities over time. I think it will start to surpass or become equal to the in-person model. And eventually you'll see artificial intelligence, you'll see holograms, you'll see the global internet allowing teachers from around the world to be the teachers. And you'll start to see eventually the future will be these things will merge, and there'll be a role for in-person, physical, and there'll be a role for exponential. And I think that's what the future holds is, you know, maybe the physical school is a place where people come and do arts and craft and music and social, because those are the things that they're missing, right? Those are the things that are hard to do, social interaction with people in physical spaces, you know, so they're right there in front of you. Or maybe you go to school to do your homework because you have the teacher there that can give you personal attention one-on-one in a physical space with that human touch. But the education portion is what you're doing in virtual worlds, because I can get educated by the best teacher anywhere in the world, right? So just something to think about, but this is a little bit of this theory of change of the way these new models of education, I think, will evolve over and replace these traditional models. And the question is, well, when is this going to happen? And we're seeing it happen. And I just, you know, the clue is don't think linear, think exponential. So what you think might take 10 or 20 years to evolve to, we might find out that it's actually it's measured in months and rather than years. So with that, you know, let me put it back to Josh and Sharon, and we'll kind of conclude here, because I think the goal now is how do we turn this theory of change and this vision into reality? And, you know, Josh, maybe you want to share a little bit about kind of the concrete pragmatic plans that NCFL is currently working on.
One of the things, Josh, that I think is important to say that I would say is, you know, at NCFL, we're known for innovation, but we're also known for rolling up our sleeves and getting the job done. So we want to get in there and make sure we can really help and know what we're doing and not just talk about it in theory, but how do we actualize it? How do we get in there and experiment? How do we make a model that is going to be something that we can continue to innovate with? You know, we're a different kind of organization. We like to talk, we like to go with policy, we like to go with teacher training, but the bottom line is we want to know that this can help families who are struggling today, who will continue to struggle without some interruption, to bring to them this kind of an opportunity to move into the future in a new way.
Building off of what Sharon said, you know, when Sharon says that we roll up our sleeves and get to work, that's exactly what we're doing at NCFL. So what we have are a group of master teachers, both employed by NCFL and who work for some partner organizations who are in the virtual space innovating today to figure out how to leverage this pedagogy for high impact family learning. We also are going to be able to announce soon that we're working with one of the largest school districts in the country to really innovate around this idea of fully immersive education. So leveraging NCFL's evidence-based model, combining it with exponential technologies, and creating an environment, a whole new world for families to learn in.
Real quickly, Josh, just because I think this is something we all talked about is, you know, as someone who practices the science of innovation and helping companies and governments do innovation, one thing that's determined is that there's antibodies in the core business that smother innovation. There's antibodies that smother innovation in most organizations. And the way I look at it, I mean, to be very candid with you, the way I look at it in the education system, and I've dedicated a lot of my time to nonprofits, to adopting this high school in South Central Los Angeles, to working with the education. My point is this, and Sharon, we talked about this, which is the core is the education system, the public education system. They have trouble innovating. They just do, because of sometimes it's bureaucracy, sometimes it's just, you know, processes in place. You talk to any teacher or administrator in the public school system, they get frustrated sometimes with the set curriculum and doing things a certain way and having it uniform, et cetera. I'm not being critical of that process. I understand why that exists. But the point is, you need to create an edge organization outside of the core that can innovate and stay away from those antibodies that smother innovation. And I really see NCFL as this edge organization for the benefit of everybody, by the way, because what happens is when the edge organization starts to have success, the core, which has an inability to educate at that pace, can leverage the learnings from the edge, and eventually the core can start putting resources into that edge, and the edge will become your new core business, the new core model. And I think that's really a theory in which the public education system, I think with NCFL's lead, playing the edge role, can eventually adopt itself and evolve into, you know, into this new core model of education. Well, I'd say, you know, hopefully this was informative to anyone that was able to listen to this conversation. I don't know, Sharon, do you want to say any final words, and we'll conclude our discussion?
Say how excited we are, and thank you, Marcus, for taking us to this space. It's just been really, really transformational for our organization. And so thank you for continuing to work with us, for having patience with us as we move forward, and really taking us to a new place where we can help families in a very robust and meaningful way into the future. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I look forward to the next video we make. I think we'll do a tour. I think we'll have the teachers host. A tour of their actual virtual classrooms with the learners. That would be a great thing to share with the community at NCFL.
Very exciting.